who's not attended a Get Doper Unmasked session before, basically we do these about once a month, and we connect with expert partners covering topics that you, our community, have expressed an interest in, things that we think will be helpful to you. And today we are very pleased to have with us Dr. Catherine Hodgkinson and Sophie Cartledge, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Dr. Katie, do you want to go first?
Thank you for having me. So yes, I'm Dr. Katie. I'm a GP and lifestyle medicine doctor, and I own and run Hampshire Health and Hormones. It's a business managing hormone health, in particular focusing on lifestyle medicine, integrated medicine, advice on diet, lifestyle, supplements. I do prescribe HRT and advise on it, but often it's a wider picture which can impact on hormones, and I see younger patients as well. So.
Thank you very much. And Sophie?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Hormones on the Blink. So the main part of what we do is we deliver workplace training around menopause, hormone health, and also neurodiversity as well. And we also run kind of community support sessions. And I come at that, I guess, from the lived experience angle of going through perimenopause or starting that at 40 and being late discovered autistic and ADHD at 44. So I'm able to bring that to the training we deliver and the people we support as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And at the end, this is partly a reminder to myself, we will discuss what resources are available for the people on the call. But we'll get to that at the end. So we're just going to go through, we've got a number of different questions covering things like how hormones and neurodivergence intersect. We're going to talk a little bit about PMDD, peri and menopause, and day-to-day functioning when hormones come into play. So Dr. Katie, my first question is for you. So how do hormones interact differently in neurodivergent brains versus neurotypical ones?
Okay, so the first thing to think about is why there might be a difference, and a lot of it's down to how we respond to neurotransmitters, and hormones essentially modulate neurotransmitters. So, for example, things like dopamine, serotonin, GABA, noradrenaline, they have lots of different functions. So things like helping with our anxiety or mood, helping with our energy, with our cognitive, our brain function, so our concentration, our memory, how we can do tasks. So they have a lot of different functions. And neurodiverse brains have different levels and sensitivities to neurotransmitters. And that can mean that you can have two people with the same level of hormones, and they may respond very, very differently to their shift in hormones and the impact that has on the neurotransmitters. And there can be particular times which are really significant times, which can impact on how someone is feeling. So, ovulation. So, and the luteal phase, the second half of the cycle. I'm going to go through what happens in a normal cycle in a second. But also, if you just had a baby and postpartum, you get a sudden drop in hormones. Perimenopause, of course, you get huge, great surges and changes, in particular of estrogen. So there can be real impact on how someone is, particularly if they've got neurodiversity, if there's the shift in hormones. So, hormones can really dial up the intensity of symptoms of someone that's got neurodiversity. The other thing to mention that in neurodiversity, then they may have a dysregulated stress response as well. And this is something called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So their ability to kind of regulate the stress response can be out of whack. And so again, if there's stress going on, that can have a direct impact on our hormones, which can impact on our neurotransmitters. So, it can be much worse in someone with neurodiversity. Just to talk about the normal hormone cycle. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are low during a period. Estrogen increases, and that peak of estrogen basically is what signals for ovulation to happen mid-cycle. Estrogen drops down, it rises, then a few days before a period, you've got a drop in estrogen. Once you've ovulated, that signals for progesterone to be released from the ovary. And progesterone often can have a kind of soothing, calming, relaxing effect. It has an impact on GABA, that neurotransmitter that helps us feel calmer. So many women feel calmer just after ovulation. And then the days before a period, you've got a drop in progesterone. So you've got a drop in estrogen progesterone, which can impact on your neurotransmitters. And that can have a direct impact on how you're feeling, which if you've got ADHD, autism, can be much more pronounced. So I know this is your second question. Coming on to that, sorry, I slightly merged into the next question.
Okay.
Estrogen can help with boosting our dopamine, our noradrenaline, our serotonin. And if we've got a drop in estrogen or fluctuation of estrogen, that can directly impact on ADHD symptoms, for example. And also progesterone, I said, helps with GABA, that kind of calming influence. But there's a flip side that in the second half of the cycle, if you are feeling calmer, more relaxed, you might not have as much motivation. Your executive function, your ability to kind of follow tasks and your memory might not be as good in the second half of the cycle. We know that ADHD brains rely heavily on dopamine. So again, the fluctuations can be quite pronounced. So yeah, a lot of reasons why it can be much more exaggerated with hormonal change with neurodiversity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katie. Sophie, my next question's for you. So what are some ways that hormonal issues might show up in day-to-day life? So people's mood, people's behaviour, etc.
Yeah, so like Dr. Katie's mentioned, I mean, I think that the thing is like when we look at the piece around, you know, finding out that you're neurodivergent, are you neurodivergent? And what we, I think, initially can imagine is, well, things are going to be the same all of the time, right? If you're sensitive, if your sensitivities, you're sensitive to noise, or you feel you've got, you know, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, we maybe think that we would have those and they're all going to be equal, right, the whole time. And so if you ask somebody on one day, you know, how it impacts them, be like, well, it doesn't. You ask them on another day, and actually these things can intensify. And as Dr. Katie's talking about, these changes that are happening with our hormones that are impacting our brain and our neurotransmitters, they fluctuate throughout the cycle. And so it might be, I used to find particularly around day 14 ovulation in perimenopause, that was rage, that was meltdowns, that was heightened sensitivity to sound, to touch, to smell, to everything. For other people, they might notice that they're really sensitive to anything that remotely sounds like rejection. And so we can go from being up here to down there with a flick of a switch, you know, that feeling of like the carpet's been pulled out from under you. Then things like brain fog, again, we associate brain fog, don't we, with perimenopause, but actually for a lot of neurodivergent women, they're going to be experiencing that at various points throughout their cycle because of the things that, you know, Dr. Katie mentioned. And so it can really vary, and helping then to track our cycle where we can, work out where we see more of those heightened traits, where we feel more sensitive, where we feel more on edge, where we feel more vulnerable, can really help to make sense of the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any particular way you recommend people track their cycle? Are there any particular apps that you recommend? What would you suggest?
So I use the Flow app, and that's really helpful if you want something that's really quick and easy, and you're just like logging, okay, when your period is and like how long it is, and then it will predict and it will tell you, you know, oh, you're late, you know. The Balance app is great if you're going through menopause, perimenopause, because you can mark on a scale brain fog today, migraines today, etc. So they can both be helpful, and kind of making notes in there of what you see happening. Other people use different apps. They're the ones that I found particularly helpful. Or just a good old-fashioned diary if you're that person, or notes in your phone.
Yep, absolutely. I'm sure we might have some people joining us right now who have a million journals knocking about at home that aren't getting used.
There you go. Get a new journal out.
Yeah,
Mark
that's the everything, isn't it? Apparently. Brilliant. Thank you. Dr. Katie, so the next question, I mean, this might already be covered, but just is there anything else you wish to add about are there biological or neurological reasons that make ADHD symptoms more intense during hormonal fluctuations? Is there anything
And
else?
I think, you know, hormones don't just work on their own, they will impact on other hormones as well. Hormones will impact on neurotransmitters. We know that gut health is very closely linked with our hormones. We know there's a link between our gut health, gut and our brain, the gut-brain axis. An unhealthy gut more likely to create anxiety and depression symptoms. A lot of it's linked to how we're breaking down and metabolizing estrogen. So there's a group of microbes in the gut called the estrobolome, which can help with estrogen metabolism. So that's another reason why gut health is really, really important for managing hormone health. Stress on the body, you know, any kind of stress, blood sugar changes, poor sleep, emotional stress, too much exercise, all of that can affect cortisol, that stress hormone. And we know that cortisol is actually derived, it comes from progesterone, and progesterone makes testosterone and estrogen. So, you know, managing stress is a key part of managing hormone health because of the impact that stress can have directly on the progesterone, the testosterone, the estrogen. So that's really, really important as well. So, you know, with neurodiversity, you know, as I mentioned, you're more likely to have a dysregulated emotional stress response. If you're not able to kind of regulate the response, you know, we need cortisol to get us out of bed in the morning. We don't want it to be persistently high. We don't want it to be kind of really have a direct impact on our hormones, which if you've got chronic stress and you're more likely to have that if you've got neurodiversity, then that's going to have a direct impact on things.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Dr. Katie, I hope you've got a glass of water with you because there's a couple more questions coming your way. Lovely, brilliant, good to see. So next question for you is, what are the key signs of PMDD? And if anyone isn't familiar with what that is, if you just don't mind explaining a little bit.
Okay, so premenstrual symptoms, PMS, probably most people have heard of. It's pretty common, and about 30% of women have moderate to severe premenstrual symptoms, so in the days before a period. So both PMDD is kind of more severe compared to PMS. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So basically, the kind of common themes between the two diagnoses is that you have symptoms in the luteal phase, the second half of the cycle, and then when the period starts, or around the time of the period, those symptoms will get better. So symptoms are following an obvious cyclical pattern. Now, there are loads of different PMS potential symptoms. Yes, mood swings, brain fog, sweats, breast tenderness, headaches, bloating, etc. With PMDD, you can still have those, but it's more extreme, and often it can really impact on the quality of life. You know, women can dread their period arriving. They might have significant emotional symptoms. They might not be able to function. They might not be able to get out of bed. They might even have suicidal thoughts every month. They might get panic attacks or anxiety. They can have sensory overload. And, you know, we talked about rejection sensitive dysphoria, you know, neurodiversity can really impact at that point. Maybe their sleep is worse, that can make it worse. So, you know, the hallmark of PMDD is that it is cyclical, it significantly impacts on the quality of life, and it's better when your period arrives. Just talking about incidence, so it's about 5 to 8% of women can have PMDD. So that, you know, it's slightly different in terms of how you manage it as well. You know, many women can quite happily function all right with the odd PMS symptom, premenstrual symptom, here or there. But PMDD can really impact on quality of life.
And how can someone tell the difference between PMDD and, inverted commas, just their neurodivergent traits?
Okay, so I mean, you are more likely to get worsening PMS, or PMS or PMDD with neurodivergence. So, you know, with neurodivergent traits, they might just have them anyway at different points, not necessarily cycle related. But we've discussed about how actually those neurotransmitters, changes in hormones, can worsen symptoms at the time of days before the period, or indeed at ovulation when your estrogen is high. because estrogen, when it's high and low, can impact on how you're feeling as well. So, you know, what you want to do is just having a look, and those neurodivergent symptoms that you got, are they worse in the days before a period? Are you struggling to function at that point? Is it better when your period starts? Are you getting more rejection sensitive dysphoria at that time? Are your executive functioning, is it worse, like ability to follow tasks or your memory? So really just going back to what Sophie said, just kind of tracking your cycle and just seeing, is there an obvious pattern with it?
Brilliant, thank you. Sophie, the next question's for you. So what does a supportive PMDD management plan look like? So, you know, if someone already struggles with emotional regulation or executive function, what can they do to support themselves?
So that, coming back to kind of tracking as much as possible where they can, so they know how they feel at which windows within their cycle. And there's something. So there's a lady called Maisie Hill. She's got a few books. One's called Period Power, the other's Perimenopause Power. And she talks about thinking about our cycle like spring, summer, autumn, winter. One of the brilliant things that she shared, and I was like, I wish somebody had told me this like years ago. Just when you're in your spring, do the batch baking.
Right.
Do the cook the healthy meals when you've got the energy, when you feel like it, when you're feeling creative in the kitchen and you want to, you know, and then put them in the freezer. So then when you get to the point in your cycle of where all you want to do is reach for the wrong foods, maybe the really like the heavy carbs and the quick sugars, right? Because we're like, well, I want that for like a dopamine boost, but also I want that because there's no way I'm standing in the kitchen cooking right now. So thinking about those ways, what prep can I do now for the point in my cycle of, like, you know, after ovulation, before my period of when it's really tough, but not then mapping that out. So when do I feel my most sociable? Okay, so I know everyday life doesn't always function like this, but giving ourselves that layer of protection of, okay, do you know, I feel really sociable at this point in my cycle. This is the point actually where I'm worried about what I'm going to say. I know I'm going to overanalyze it. I'm going to spend days in a doom hole about it, right? Because I just shouldn't have seen people. So maybe we give ourselves that protection of, we're not socializing at this point. We're watching Netflix. We have our safe people around us. And then the same from a workplace aspect. Hopefully, if you do have a supportive workplace of where maybe you shift certain tasks up. Can you change? Can you book, you know, if you're in sales, for example, can you focus on that? Can you book those calls in at that point in your cycle? And this point in your cycle, when things get tough, this is where you catch up on all of your admin, the bits where you don't have to interact with people. And ask them to, you know, if you can, if you're going to give me some, what's the word? If you want to give me some feedback, or to make them aware of how they do that, because we know there's nothing worse than, can we have a chat at the end of the day? Because for anybody that's neurodivergent, and then if you're your PMDD on top of that, that's just like, you know, it's going to feel like game over. So asking people to be sensitive, maybe having words that we use at home with our family and at work. You know, I used to say to my husband, like, I'm in the danger zone right now. Just
Right.
so you know, right?
Awesome.
just a little flag, a little warning of how you're feeling, and then you don't have to like carry the guilt of, I feel like I've reacted in the wrong way. Actually, I've given people the notice. I'm doing the best to protect myself as much as I can, and that's all you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a note, then, you mentioned about batch cooking. For anyone who is on the call, we actually have a series of super easy batch cook recipes. They're on our YouTube, they're on our socials, and everything is only 5 steps and 5 ingredients. Everything is full of protein. You know, we've really thought about what a neurodivergent brain needs. So if that is something that anyone on the call is struggling with and they want to go and check out some recipes, just thought mention it at this point. It seems like a good time to say it.
Brilliant. That's a nice segue, that is.
There's some lovely ones on there. We work with an ADHD nutritionist who's absolutely brilliant. So really good stuff. Okay, so Sophie, our next question again is for you. Are there any myths about PMDD that you wish people understood?
So there's a couple. I think one is the fact of, so I don't have PMDD myself, but I meet a lot of women. I have close friends that, that have PMDD as well. And I think the big thing is the underestimating of this isn't just a hormonal imbalance, like the sheer level of impact, like Dr. Katie was mentioning, like suicidal thoughts, it's so real. How people feel at the first half of their cycle versus the second half of their cycle. And it is something they know that they're facing like month in, month out. So I think that is one of the key things, like never for women to not beat themselves up about the fact that they should be coping better, that any of those things, because it's real. And the second thing is, very often with hormone health conditions, if we go to the GP, if we have appointments on the NHS, this is not knocking the NHS, but we are very often kind of left with, this is just something you have to put up with and you have to cope with. There's no end date in sight. But actually, there are so many things that can be done, like, for example, working with Dr. Katie, and those lifestyle things that she mentioned, from nutrition to movement to supporting hormones, that isn't something, whatever the hormone condition is, PMDD or otherwise, that you just have to put up with without any help or support.
Absolutely, yeah. I know I've certainly seen, we've worked with people with PMDD, experts in that field, who hadn't known they had it, but then expressed this urge once a month to leave their partner, to leave their job, to uproot their life, and didn't realize that was the reason, that it was the hormones that were making them feel that way, but just this urge to absolutely blow up their lives.
Yeah. And that impulsivity is so common at that time as well, because when you're in it, you don't always know, can't really kind of manage emotions well. So,
and I think when we don't know, that's where the danger is, isn't it? Because so many women, when they don't know what's underneath it, they blame themselves. And when they're already struggling with like self-esteem and maybe this rejection sensitivity and the impulsivity around how we've maybe reacted to things, and then the guilt that's carried afterwards, that's why we need more awareness, don't we, to know if you are wanting to literally get a match every month and blow it all up, it's not.
What I want to mention, sorry, if you've got the coil, it can be really hard to track that, because if you've got the coil where you're not having periods, very difficult to kind of know, okay, my periods come, that's why I was feeling the way it was. And that's why it comes down to the tracking and just looking at, as Sophie said, just tracking the cycle, because it may be very well that you've got these symptoms and you're getting it on a regular basis, but without the period it's much harder. So it's just bearing that in mind, those women that don't have periods with the coil. But
that's really helpful to mention. That's great. Obviously, if anyone in the chat wants to add any questions around this, you can do so, and we will we'll come to them at the end. So please feel free to start popping them in there. But now we're going to move on to peri and menopause. So, Dr. Katie, so how can perimenopause mimic or mask ADHD symptoms, and is it often misdiagnosed?
Okay, so let's just talk about what's happening to the hormones in the perimenopause. So the first thing is, often progesterone naturally declines, then estrogen fluctuates, and it can be quite big fluctuations, really quite significant from a day-to-day basis, and it's overall declining. And then when women reach menopause, the ovaries shrink and there's minimal production of those hormones. So in terms of order of play of symptoms, then progesterone, as we know, helps with GABA, can help have a soothing, calming, relaxing effect, can help with reducing fluid retention. So one of the first signs you might get when your progesterone is dropping, you might get new PMS symptoms or worsening of existing PMS symptoms. You might get heavier periods because estrogen builds up the lining of the womb and progesterone maintains it. So if you've got a drop in progesterone, your periods might become heavier. Your cycle might become a bit shorter. Then as estrogen fluctuates, it can feel like those symptoms are not really following an obvious cyclical pattern. It can feel literally like it's all over the place. Your periods might become irregular, they might become heavy or light, you might feel anxious one day, you might feel sweaty the next day. It can be really, really hard. So those big fluctuations can have a direct impact on hormones. Now, there's obviously a big crossover with symptoms at the perimenopause and ADHD, reduced memory, concentration, reduced brain functioning, mental health, fatigue, overwhelm, problems organizing yourself. All of those symptoms can be perimenopause, but ADHD it can as well. And interestingly, a lot of women, there's a cohort of women who are diagnosed for the first time with ADHD or neurodiversity at the perimenopause. And a history of symptoms is really, really important. And, if someone says to me, actually, I've had reduced concentration and memory forever, really, for a long time, I really struggled at school, exams, couldn't really focus, I've had lots of different jobs, relationships being different, so you want to really look back at someone's history. And if it's a new thing, these kind of cognitive symptoms and other symptoms are relatively new, obviously it's less likely to be neurodiversity, but bearing in mind that neurodiversity symptoms can be greatly heightened at the perimenopause, and this is why often in women it can be diagnosed at this time, whereas men tend to be more kind of hyperactive in many sorts. And often women are it's put down their neurodiversity symptoms like, oh, it's just PMS, or it's just your hormones, or are just feeling a bit anxious. It's kind of normal characteristics. So it can be difficult, but I have seen a lot of patients where we manage the hormones and diet, lifestyle supplements, maybe HRT, and still got some of these symptoms ongoing. And I'm so I ask historically anyway to find out how long they've had this for. But I have had patients where I've actually referred them to psychiatrists, and they've come back and been diagnosed neurodiversity at that stage. And often they might be started on medication depending on what they want to do, or diet, lifestyle, etc. So it can be kind of a shared care with psychiatry, GP, hormone health, menopause doctor. So yeah, there is definitely an overlap, but it's looking back on the history and getting kind of detailed history, really.
Brilliant. I know certainly we meet so many women who were only diagnosed once they hit peri or menopause. Like, it's a really frequent thing, and that's represented in sort of the demographic of our community. That's why they come to us, because that they have this realization later in life.
Yeah.
So next question. So is it highly likely, if you've got ADHD, that you'll experience more extreme peri and menopausal symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, so going back to what I said at the beginning in terms of how neurotransmitters can be different levels and different sensitivities with neurodiversity. So then, you've got this time of great hormonal change in the perimenopause, which can then further exaggerate symptoms. So absolutely, there's great sensitivity in neurodiversity to the loss of dopamine. So estrogen helps with dopamine. If estrogen's low or fluctuating, then that can then exaggerate some of the neurodiversity symptoms. I talked about the the dysregulated stress response as well. It's a stressful time at perimenopause. Your body's undergoing natural stress anyway. It's often the time where you're managing kids and elderly parents, working, maybe financial pressures, maybe exhausted, and your diet's not great. There's a lot of stress going on at this time anyway. And it's not uncommon for those kind of baseline executive difficulties to worsen. And then if you're not sleeping well and you've got more anxiety, it's kind of vicious, a perfect storm, really. So yeah, absolutely, you can get worsening ADHD symptoms at that time.
Thank you. Now, I know that I did say before we'd wait until the end to answer all questions, but because this one is specifically about perimenopause, I think it makes sense to answer it at this point in the chat. And just again, to say to people, if there's anything you want to ask, please feel free to pop it in the chat. So I'm just going to read out the question. So thanks for sharing this. So, hi, I'm just going to flip my screen over. I'm going to read it off here because it's easier. I was non-stop stressed and misunderstood the last 2 decades. Now I'm in my mid-30s. Finally, my life is less stressful, good job, stable situation. But I heard that women with ADHD, I have autism too, could have the perimenopause earlier. I have a hormone implant since many years because my period is very painful and it helped me so much. I did break a few years back, but I have to go back to the implant. How do I know when I get into menopause?
So historically, things have changed. So I've been a GP for God, how many years now? I can't remember now. 17 years or something. So 17 years ago, we were taught if someone comes in thinking they've got perimenopause or menopause, do a blood test for follicle stimulating hormone and estrogen. And if it's normal, go, no, you're fine, off you go. Come back when things are worse and when your estrogen's low and FSH is high. We actually know that those blood tests are not very useful for helping to diagnose perimenopause, because often, as I mentioned, estrogen's fluctuating and follicle stimulating hormone often doesn't rise till actually when you're really close to menopause. So it's not very useful to do a blood test for that. However, nice guidelines are that if someone is before the age of 40, you do a blood test for follicle stimulating hormone. If that's high, you repeat it again, and that basically helps to confirm menopause. Perimenopause is a bit different. So I would usually do such blood tests anyway for other things, and most of my patients I do a blood test anyway. I want to get the wider picture, so I often do a detailed thyroid check, including antibodies to thyroid, looking for things like vitamin D, B12, folate, iron, CRP, marker of inflammation, diabetes, blood count. Those are just some examples of some of the blood tests that I do. It's not uncommon for there to be other things playing a role. Like a low vitamin D, it is a hormone. It can impact on other hormones. A lot of hormonal issues are linked to not having optimal levels of vitamin D. We know that B12, folate, magnesium can help the estrogen metabolism. So, sometimes it might be a case of diet, lifestyle, sometimes supplements, see how someone gets on. If someone's before the age of 40, then, it might be a case of following the guidelines, doing the follicle stimulating hormone. If it's normal and you've kind of looked into the diet and lifestyle supplements, you might then query a trial of either hormone replacement therapy or the combined pill. So in younger women, often the combined pill is used to manage symptoms of the perimenopause. There is a difference between the two. With a combined pill, basically it's synthetic progesterone and estrogen, and you're suppressing ovulation, which can actually be really useful for managing PMS symptoms and PMDD in many cases. But with the HRT, it depends on the dose, really. So that you need to discuss with your practitioner, whoever you're seeing, discuss all the management options, which I know we're going to come on to in a second. But yeah, it can be harder to diagnose perimenopause in younger women because it's not on doctors' radar so much and patients' radar. There may be other things going on. And, the management might be slightly different. Someone who's younger compared to someone who's late 40s, where, you're much more naturally going to go for HRT at that point. So.
Thank you very much. Sophie, so I can see we've got another couple of questions. We will get to those in a moment. Thank you. Keep sharing, everyone, if you've got any more questions. Just to keep on the topic of peri and menopause for the moment. So, Sophie, are there any early signs of perimenopause that neurodivergent people should be looking out for?
Yeah, so we did a survey of about just over 300 kind of women and asked them, what were some of the symptoms and kind of traits that you found, more apparent at that time and more challenging. And I think at the top actually was overwhelm, was a feeling of overwhelm. And sometimes we can find it hard, right, to describe what overwhelm is. But very often, if we're neurodivergent, we've been great at, we mentioned it before the call, like juggling all the plates and having, multitasking, whatever you want to call it, 7 conversations going on in our brain, thinking about what we're doing tomorrow, etc. And it's kind of like that's still there, but there's this added fog on top, which means we can't quite access all of those now. And so there's this increased feeling of overwhelm of, wow, there's all this stuff going on in my head, and just our brain in itself can make us feel overwhelm. So overwhelm, added kind of emotional dysregulation, heightened sensitivity. We mentioned that to our senses. And I think a lady kind of here she's touched. I was just going to mention that in the questions, but the part around people say, well, if you haven't had it your whole life, right, then you can't have it now. And so this is what can be really confusing to us experiencing, but also then to perhaps people that we're seeing. But very often what happens is perimenopause makes it no longer possible for you to be able to mask these things that you feel like you kept it all together, and now everything's falling apart and spilling over, etc. But when you look back, if you track back, and you can see these traits that have been there, but somehow you've managed them, like often people will have really almost extreme ways of making sure they remember things. So they're never late. They always externally look like they've got it all together, but inside they've been all this effort. Then we get to perimenopause and we're missing meetings and we're turning up late because we can't mask that any longer. So I just thought that might be helpful to share that. Like Dr. Katie mentioned, if you can go back and track, the mum that I was the mum that would drop my kids off at school or try and drop them off on an inset day because I hadn't realised there was an inset day, or I'd have to rush home and make up an Egyptian outfit because it was, in 10 minutes, and then rush them back to school again because I couldn't keep on top of school admin. That was always there. It was a joke, but you get to perimenopause and it's like a whole nother 10 layers of that.
I mean, hopefully some of what you've just said will have helped with that second question about ADHD symptoms suddenly making an appearance and it being connected to perimenopause. So I hope that's helped with that question. Just to read our third one. So brain fog, sensitivity and distractions are becoming increasingly difficult to manage. It's affecting your job. You've got undiagnosed ADHD. Didn't want to get diagnosed and put on meds. That's a thing that we obviously hear quite a lot at DOPA because they make sleep and anxiety worse. Yeah. Again, it's a very, very familiar thing for us. So best option, what to do? Get blood tests to check hormone levels or get an ADHD assessment?
I'm not allowed to give personal advice on here, unfortunately, because of a doctor. We're not allowed to give a lot of personal advice. I mean, the general approach really is, yes, blood test to make sure there's nothing else going on and anything else that could be impacting on hormones. And then, so the diet and lifestyle plays a massive role in managing hormones, which can then help neurotransmitters, which can support ADHD symptoms. Sorry, I didn't quite catch if she'd been diagnosed or not. Was she?
Undiagnosed.
Undiagnosed. Fine. I mean, it depends, what would the diagnosis help if you were going to think about medication or extra support? In many cases, absolutely, it can be good to have a diagnosis because it kind of explains what's going on. And then maybe other avenues which you can get help from. Other people might go, well, I've had this all my life and fine, don't need it. But it depends on each person really, but absolutely there's a lot of support out there, especially now there's much more information about neurodiversity and what can help. Part of management of neurodiversity may indeed include managing hormone health as well, because it's so closely linked. So, it might be thinking about that avenue as well, depending on your age. Don't have to be menopausal to manage your hormone health. Of course, you can be younger and manage your PMS symptoms. You maybe got endometriosis, PCOS, or something else going on. There may be a hormonal imbalance. So, thinking about hormone health is really important for managing it. So there are different options. And as I said, it's not one size fits all. There's no like, you've got to do this or do that. But yeah, I think blood testing would be a good starting point.
So we've got quite a few questions to get through. I think if we go through the questions now and then we'll get to our final section on sort of lived experience in day-to-day life, if that's okay with you, because we've got a lot of questions coming through about PMDD, so it seems like a good place to answer them. So next question, Dr. Katie Sophie, can you see the questions in the chat, by the way? You can.
I can't, no, I can't at all.
Okay, that's it just became obvious as you were answering that you couldn't see them, so I just wanted to
I can't see them at all. Where are they? Am I being really daft?
down the right hand side of the page, but don't worry, I'll read the questions out. I just wanted to check whether you could see them.
Can you see where it says comments and then private chat?
Oh yes.
Yeah, so if you click on private chat, it pops up. They pop up there.
It's me being not very observant. Sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Okay, where did we get to?
So looking at this next one, so we are 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So hello, I'm autistic and ADHD. I'm fairly sure I've got PMDD too. I resonate with a lot of what was said here. What do you think is the most effective way of managing PMDD long term? I'm 19 and keen to avoid antidepressants as I don't believe I need them, but I haven't gone to my GP yet because I'm worried that it'll be dismissed or only superficially treated.
Yeah, I mean, good question. So obviously it's a little bit different when you're younger compared to being older, and part of PMDD guidelines is thinking about antidepressants is there as one of the list of things. If hormones are obviously playing a role there, it's just thinking about, is your vitamin D low? Is, thinking about supplements. I can't really advise on generic supplement advice because it depends on each case, but kind of things like magnesium, B6, omega-3, vitamin D can be helpful, but I wouldn't want to advise specific amounts or as I said, often with vitamin D, you need to work out, is it low in the first place? So I think getting blood tests is a starting point, really. Managing the hormone side of things, a contraceptive pill is also up there. To manage hormone health, and not everyone can take the contraceptive pill. Unfortunately, about 10 to 20% of women have progesterone intolerance, which is much more likely with progestin than, say, a body identical progesterone as part of HRT. So that can sometimes be a reason why women don't want to try the combined pill. Sometimes women do actually give HRT for managing PMDD to help suppress ovulation. Then it's thinking about, managing the stress in your life, managing your stress response, thinking about, maybe seeing some therapists, CBT, thinking about meditation, mindfulness, vagus nerve exercises. Basically the vagus nerve is kind of opposite to the sympathetic fight or flight state that a lot of people are often in, with that dysregulated nervous system. And the vagus nerve has kind of that kind of calming influence. Things like breathing exercises, water on your face, gargling, abdominal breathing, put your hand on your tummy, breathe in slowly in and out, trying things like that. So PMDD is not, diet and lifestyle will have some effect. It probably won't be enough to manage the PMDD. So it does need to have kind of sometimes medical input for it. But it's really just talking about the different options for it. So, but yeah, I can't give direct advice. Sorry, just reach.
No, Katie, that's great. Okay, so I mean, this might fall under that one slightly, but our next question is, what are your thoughts on using medication only during specific parts of the cycle for managing PMDD rather than taking it continuously?
Yeah, so sometimes antidepressants are taken in the luteal phase, so it's just for those second half of the cycle, and that is sometimes done. Yes, absolutely. So that that could be an option, or thinking about supplements again to help support things like estrogen metabolism, help support your progesterone. But yeah, absolutely. So example is the antidepressants is sometimes given to things like sertraline, which are SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Basically helps. We talk about serotonin being one of our neurotransmitters, so it can often support PMDD symptoms. So what's it going to have factors approach someone here? So ADHD. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's again managing the sense of nervous system as well, and other things that can impact on ADHD symptoms. Obviously the ADHD discussion about whether or not the medication for ADHD would be an option, thinking about supplements and diet and lifestyle as well. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Our next question is around ADHD and PCOS. So she said that PMS seems to get worse and it's difficult to track the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, with PCOS, a part of the diagnosis is often infrequent ovulation. So it might mean that you don't have periods very often. And so it might mean that you're not following an obvious cyclical pattern. So it is very, very difficult. And there's certain kind of themes quite common with PCOS, things like, it says very commonly, most people have got insulin resistance, which can exacerbate symptoms and lead to things like testosterone being increased in many cases. But also with PCOS, they might also have low progesterone or estrogen metabolism issues. It might be linked to the gut health. So 70% of our immune system's in the gut. A lot of hormonal issues, as I said before, are linked to gut health. Tracking the cycle, if there isn't a cycle, it is tricky. It is tricky to do. Appreciate that. It's just having a look to see, are there any kind of patterns to your symptoms, even if you're not having periods? Is there anything that might make it worse, like poor sleep, or is it because I've had sugar that day and my blood sugar is high and low? So it's just looking at what you're eating and looking at those sides of things as well.
Brilliant. So this isn't so much a question as a bit of advice in case anyone on the call can't see this in the chat. In case this is helpful for others, I've taken fluoxetine and SSRI to manage PMDD for the last few years. I take single dose 20 milligrams during the first half follicular phase of my cycle, and then around ovulation I double up to 40 milligrams until about day 1 or 2 of my next cycle. This has allowed me to manage the worst of the PMDD symptoms. However, now my hormones are impacted, my peri, it's less under control. Thank you so much for sharing that, and in case there's anyone that would find that useful, thank you. That's it's helpful to have some lived experience. Thank you.
Yeah, links in with the sort of change of the dose, different parts of the cycle. So that sort of fits with that.
Brilliant. So, next section we're moving on to is lived experience and daily functioning. So, Dr. Katie, I'm going to start with you. So, how do hormonal shifts impact executive function, motivation, energy, and emotional regulation?
Yeah, so we've talked about how hormones can really impact in this area, and especially if you've got neurodiversity, it can make it much more exaggerated. So executive function is things like tasks and memory, and you might become more reduced memory, difficulty following tasks or completing or even starting a task, and then it's getting distracted. So, trying to do one thing and then something else happens, and then suddenly you haven't remembered what you were supposed to be doing. So that can really be impacted by hormones. We know that decrease in dopamine, if there's a shift of estrogen levels, can really impact on that ability to kind of start and finish tasks. Energy, we know that shifts in hormones can really impact on energy and sleep. Obviously, if you're not sleeping, then that can mean that you can feel quite suddenly fatigued if there's a shift in your hormones. You might feel actually overstimulated and then just feel really exhausted afterwards. So hormones can play a role with that. Your emotions can be all over the place, anyway, from hormones, but much more exaggerated with neurodiversity. So we talked about that rejection sensitive dysphoria, particularly in the days for a period. You might find that you're very irritable, you might be really anxious suddenly, and there might not be any obvious cause for that. You might become very tearful or angry. So, even just slight shifts, as I said at the beginning, you can have two people with the same hormone levels and they can respond very, very differently to that. So, they can it depends on how they're processing the hormones, metabolizing it, what their neurotransmitters are doing, what other hormones are playing a role, like stress, like thyroid function, like testosterone changes. Are there other things going on like inflammation or gut health issues? As you probably gathered, it's not just this hormone does this, that does that. They will impact on each other. So it's kind of spider web really. And there are lots of different things which can upregulate or downregulate hormones, so affect the hormone levels, affect how it's being metabolized. So for example, our liver metabolizes hormones, and our gut health does as well. So I'll give the example of estrogen. A lot of hormonal symptoms are related to if someone's got a problem breaking down estrogen, metabolizing estrogen. For example, things like endometriosis, fibroids, breast cysts, ovarian cysts, heavy periods. If someone's not metabolizing estrogen adequately, that might play a role with the symptoms. And we know that estrogen is metabolized twice through the liver and the third way through the bowels. So gut health, really important. Regular bowel movements, good hydration, things to help support our liver, like reducing toxins, alcohol, too much sugar, healthy diet. So the liver, the gut can play a role with it. So daily functioning very much can be impacted on just even slight shifts in our hormones.
Brilliant. And is there any way people can prepare for those low hormone days?
Yeah, so knowing, it's easier when you've got a cycle. This is my period, it's regular. We know these are the not so good days in the second half of the cycle, luteal phase, and it's coming. Obviously, it's harder if your periods are irregular, like perimenopause or PCOS, or if you have Mirena coil, it's a bit harder to do that, to work out when are those down days. But if you know that, potentially if you spot the signs coming, or if it's coming, you want to make sure that potentially you're not having a crazy time, maybe at work, or doing too much at that time. So you probably want to think about having a quieter period of time at that stage. Being, as Sophie's touched on some of this already, that the prepping, the food preparation, telling people this is my bad time, it's coming, maybe letting work know if they're understanding, hopefully they would be, letting your family know that this is why I am at this stage, and charting it so you kind of have a bit more of an idea about what's happening. But yeah, perimenopause can be tricky because it can kind of come from nowhere sometimes. But I think just being kind to yourself, knowing that actually I'm allowed to feel like this. This is just my hormones. It's not me. And just being aware about techniques that can help yourself. Maybe timers, if memory is a problem at that stage, reminders about what you need to do, having a diary, having a timer, things like that, just to kind of help G yourself up, to help with their functioning at that point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katie. I'm going to let you have a rest from talking for a minute, and I'm going to throw over to Sophie. I think we've got a couple more comments coming in via YouTube, so I'll share those as and when I've got them. So, Sophie, what are some realistic accommodations that help during hormonal dips?
Yeah, so that I feel like we've touched on some of these already, and I think Dr. Katie's mentioned them. But some of the I think main ones are thinking about what can you delegate, what can you take off of your plate, and is there anything today that actually what's not necessary, like having almost an immediate reprioritize of what has to be done today, what's optional, where can I park that. We mentioned earlier, didn't we, about kind of letting people know around us how we're feeling, getting them on board with things that we might need more support with. What was the other thing I mentioned? I made a note of. One of the things that I would also do, so when I was particularly struggling with executive function, hormones being impacted, is I'd give myself 3 easy tasks to do first thing in the morning. And it would literally be like, I don't know, email Sarah, text this person about that, work-related stuff. And then I'd tick it off, big ticks. And that would kind of help me then to find the oomph to do the bigger pieces of work that I could do. So just finding ways, Dr. Katie mentioned it, about being really kind of compassionate, self-compassionate about where we're at, the fact that our hormones could absolutely be impacting how we're feeling. What can we get off of our plate? What can we delegate? Where can we bring in support? And what can we do to kind of do the best with what we've got on that day? Whether it's three ticks, find the wins. I add to the list as well. So as I've remembered something else that goes on the list, and I tick that off as well.
Oh, I love adding a thing to the list once I've
So
already done
I.
it. It's a good feeling.
I'm like, go me.
I know, I am overachieving today.
Exactly.
We've had another question come in via YouTube. So I think if I can put this question to you, Dr. Katie, and then I'm going to ask you, Sophie, to share with people what resources they have available from Hormones on the Blink. So, Dr. Katie, the question we've got that's coming is, How do large amounts of exercise impact all of this? I notice if I do too much, I'm an endurance athlete, it all seems worse. It's not the nice exercise high, more irritable low mood.
Yeah, so too much or too little exercise can impact on our stress system, our cortisol, and particularly, when I'm speaking to, say, perimenopausal women, I'm sort of saying to them, like, maybe just focus on the gentle to moderate exercise, especially muscle strengthening exercises. Our muscle mass decrease from our 30s onwards. Yoga, gentle to moderate cardio. But sometimes if we do intense, high intensity interval training or high intense exercise, it can sometimes exacerbate the stress on our body. And in some people, it can make them feel really tired afterwards. Not everyone. Some people will feel energized after a HIIT session, but more commonly, as I mentioned, all the kind of stress going on at this time of life in the perimenopause, then it can often, in many cases, make them feel more fatigued. So just listen to your body. If you feel that actually you can't manage that stress, you're feeling worse after it, maybe just to not do it so much or just rein it in a bit. We also know that when you're under stress, we use up magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin C. We want to kind of make sure that we're well nourished and that our nutrients are good. And thinking about other ways to manage the stress on the body, because it doesn't mean to say you can't ever do HIIT again. It just means that actually you want to kind of manage the impact of stress on our body. And sometimes it might be, you might be able to tolerate that better again. But if you're regularly feeling crap and just feeling fatigued, maybe it's not the best for you at that time for your body. It might be exacerbating the stress response.
Thank you so much. So we've just got a couple of minutes left before we close. So I just think we're really a nice opportunity, Sophie, if you want to share with the people on the call what resources are available and tell them a little bit about where they can go for advice.
Yeah, sure. So we've got on the Hormones on the Blink website, we've got a resources page, and we've got a number of different resources for speaking to your GP about being neurodivergent, whether that's because you are considering an assessment, whether it's because you want them to kind of have a bit of understanding around what's happening hormonally and how you're feeling in terms of your traits, whether it's wanting them to take into account ADHD medication and how that might impact you differently throughout the cycle. And we've got an Unlocking Neurodiversity and Hormones guide as well, again full of lived experience, full of resources at the back of that, of where you can go for assessments if that's what you want, podcasts that you want to listen to, others that you can reach out to. So yeah, I'd really recommend download those and have a look. And I think just very quickly, I know we mentioned about requests that you can make at workplaces, but really thinking about what could help you get through the day. Is it noise cancelling headphones? Is it asking for somewhere quiet to work? Is it that you need 10 minutes with somebody to say, hey, can you help me prioritize what needs to be done today, because I'm feeling really overwhelmed by it all? And really seeing it like they're a basic human need that you have. You aren't a burden, an annoying employee. Sometimes that's how we feel, right? I've got these additional needs I need to ask for. These are the basic human needs. You have every right to ask for that support.
Brilliant. Yeah, so if people want to check out Hormones on the Blink after they get off this call,
thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
loads of helpful things there. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that's joined us, and thank you to Sophie and Dr. Katie. It's been really, really helpful, and I hope people have got a lot out of it. So thank you so much to both of you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me too. It's been lovely to be with you all.
Oh, thank you guys so much. And I hope everyone on the call has a lovely evening.